Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Bulletproof Selling. Sean Rhodes here, Chief Sales Sergeant of Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. And here at Bulletproof Selling, our mission and our mantra is that sales should not be reliant on hope. Hope is not a sales strategy. And so for years, we've been showing up here with best-selling authors, Hall of Fame speakers, and folks that have spent decades growing and supervising, training, and helping develop sales teams around the world, all so that they can serve more while they sell more. So here at Bulletproof Selling, our entire purpose is to help you develop the systems that you need so that you can remove more hope from how you sell. And so every one of these episodes, we build a system with our guests to make sure that you can do that no matter the size of your goals or the size of your team. Now, one area that a lot of salespeople fall back on hope, where hope kind of creeps into their plan, even though they may not know about it, is when they look at their pipeline and they think, okay, I'm doing pretty good. I got all the verticals filled up. I got some folks moving in the right direction. So when they sit down with their sales leaders, they say, hey, boss, things are good. Well, are they though? Are they good enough that you would want to step into a courtroom and be convicted on the basis of what you have in your CRM, on the quality of those leads that you're putting through your pipeline? Can you really fall back on those, or are you hoping? Probably more than you should. Well, that's one of the topics we're going to dive into today with someone that has spent decades of their life growing and managing sales teams at some of the largest organizations on the planet. So without further ado, because I know I'm going to learn a lot of great stuff from today's conversation, it's my pleasure to welcome to Bulletproof Selling, Paul Butterfield, the founder of the Revenue Flywheel Group. Paul, welcome, sir, to Bulletproof Selling.
Thank you, Sarge. I almost called you Sarge. Thank you, Sarge. How about that? I meant to say Sean.
I'll take it.
Excited to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. Yeah, it's been a long time since anyone has addressed me as sergeant, but that was definitely a rank that I was proud to earn. So, Paul, for what you do, man, I mean, going down your LinkedIn profile, I feel like I'm talking to somebody that has led sales teams of, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, because just the experiences that you've had over a couple of decades, growing these teams, managing them, making sure they're doing the right thing. I'd love to learn about your journey in sales, who you serve today, and kind of what you have done to differentiate yourself, because I know we're going to talk a lot about differentiation today. So go for it, man.
All right. Well, as you said, I spent some time on the sales field, the sales battlefield, if you want to call it that. I love sales. People. I'm not the first one to say it's the greatest profession in the world, but I do believe that it's not easy. If it was easy, everybody'd be doing it, because on the great days, there's nothing better, right? But it's not for everybody. It's a very black and white world. There's really no gray on your performance. There's no second place. I mean, these may all sound like cliches, but until you've lived that, it's a little hard to understand. I've talked to people that thought they might want to get into sales, and I encourage it. But that's one of the things that I advise them is like, look, if you're still, thinking about those one-on-ones where your manager talks to you about your performance in a room somewhere, that day's over, because anybody with a Salesforce login is going to know exactly how good you are at your job. Yeah. And you need to be comfortable with that. But that said, I love what you said about sales as service, because that's something that I not only believe, but I have found is really a key to success. Stop trying to sell so hard and focus more on uncovering what it is that the prospect's trying to deal with and finding alignment with what you're offering.
No, that's incredible. It's the groups that you've been able to serve over the course of your career. Then talk to me a little bit about how that led you into your role today, where you're the founder of a group that takes revenue and treats it as a flywheel. That's a really interesting concept in sales. Walk me through that.
Sure. So just from practical experience, and my experience for the most part has been in SaaS. I was with HP the beginning of my tech sales career, and that was my last hardware job. That's been a while. So when I look at, especially within the SaaS world, the types of interactions that we're having with prospects, and as a sales leader, I would see this and painfully live it. I'll give you a couple examples. How often does what's being created, and this is no disrespect to our friends in marketing, it's just you can find all sorts of research on this. How often is what's being created for sales to use out of alignment with the way, at least as a leader, I wanted my sellers to be talking to prospects? I don't want them walking in with a list of features and going down the checkbox and checking off boxes. Unfortunately, that's often how our websites are set up, or that's how collateral is being set up. On the flip side, I observed firsthand how terrible the experience can be between, say, sales and professional services, and sales and customer success. if for no other reason, then it's rare for the same group of people that sales sold to be the same group of people that are driving implementation and the longer term relationship with the customer success manager. And so if you don't have all of those teams linked up and linked up through CRM, linked up through having a common language and having this very customer centric or outward in, that needs to be in their DNA. But when you get that point, and it can happen, I could share some great stories, it elevates the experience for prospects and customers. They notice it, they'll comment on it. But you know what else? Everybody is having more fun too. Not every day, but it's just a better experience for the employees. But that's what so I took those observations and then tried to figure out how have I seen it that we were able to align those things when it wasn't working? How did we fix it? And then trying to bring that perspective and that experience in with clients that I work with now.
That's amazing. And you talked a lot about, sitting down with the sales manager and, having to actually prove that, things are where they say they are. So in the military, we had this concept of building an intelligence package or a target package on our targets. And when I say target, I'm not, we're not trying to murder our prospects, thank God, because we love them dearly. They're all great people. But I also want to be able to serve them. And the more I know about them, the more I can serve them more quickly, rather than having to learn it all on every single phone call. So I'm curious where you see salespeople falling back on the hope that they have in how they're structuring their deals, how they're proving that deals are where they say they are in the pipeline. Because I've got to sit down with the sales leader and I've got to prove. If he just takes me on my word, well, that's going to last until the revenue starts to dip, and might then be too late to solve that problem. We're going to have a couple of months to get that thing back on track, rather than we can spot that problem a lot sooner and get it on track this week. So talk to me about where you see hope factor in a lot with the clients that you work with.
Two big areas in talking about the pipeline like we were. Number one, don't rely so much on relationships. Far too many sellers still feel like they've got to be friends with people that they're selling to be successful. Not my experience. Sometimes it happens, but out of hundreds or thousands of opportunities I've been involved in my sales career, I can count on one hand the number of times prospects actually became friends. And it was really cool when it happened. But too many sellers hope for that. And they also then use that as a false gauge as to how things are going. So that's one area. And the other one's really connected to, and that is, when you sit down and you tell your boss that something's in stage 1, 2, 3, you're committing it for the end of the quarter, way too often, that's your opinion. It is not an objective one. Number one, you need the deal to close. And so you can't help but hope the deal is going to close. But if you're not collecting inputs from your customer that tell you where they are in their buying cycle, and you're not aligning to that, it really is hope to a large degree. And at the end of the cycle, we've all done it. I've been there, right? We will discount. We will do what we got to do to hit the number. But is that the ideal experience for the prospect? Have we just cheapened ourselves and cheapened our product a little bit in the process to force through something because we weren't in alignment with them?
Oh, yeah. And everybody has a plan until they get hit with the hard facts of reality. So for a lot of salespeople, I've seen this myself. I've got a great plan for how I'm going to add value. But then when that plan evaporates in front of me, I have to pull value from somewhere. And that's when discounts, concessions, I start giving stuff away. Absolutely what you just said. So this is a really great system to build for salespeople around the world, no matter what they sell. Because I think if we could all be more objective, it doesn't mean we can't build relationships, but it means that we don't have to base our revenue on an opinion. Instead, we can base it when we project our revenue in our pipeline on objective facts, the data that we're collecting, like you said, the things that are being captured. So in the military, on all the battlefields I was able to serve on, we were able to remove hope with these systems. And of course, our systems look like, how do we clear a house better? How do we keep more people alive? How do we accomplish our missions faster? And so with every new system, we were able to peel more hope back. So we were trimming hope away. That's exactly what we get to do here on Bulletproof Selling, trim hope away with every one of these systems. And because in the military, we're big on acronyms, we use this acronym TRIM. So the T in TRIM is the trigger. Now, if I'm a salesperson and I want to start this for myself, or I'm a sales leader and I want my salespeople to be a little more objective in how they're structuring their deals, where do I trigger this? Is it when a deal gets entered into the CRM? Is it when I'm identifying my ideal customer profile? Is it when I hire a salesperson for the first time? It happens day one in training. Where do you recommend I trigger a system that allows me to be more objective in how I am structuring my deals?
Well, if you've got brand new salespeople coming into the organization, then you absolutely trigger it during onboarding. But the reality is most companies I work with aren't going to go fire 300 salespeople and go rehire them all.
Much as they would
So
like
what
to, yeah.
maybe they would like to. However, so then what's the reality? How do you take an existing organization in flight, as it were, and adjust the course of it? And that's really the key, because it's usually that's the reality. And so triggering at that point, I look at a little bit differently. And it starts with the very top of the funnel. Many organizations, I would say most organizations I've been part of, had very inconsistent, or if they had it, it wasn't great qualification for what makes it into a sales rep's funnel. Whether the opportunity is coming from an SDR to be converted, a partner to be converted, or it's something I went out and found on my own as a sales rep, doesn't matter. But we want to keep garbage out of the top of the funnel. And without consistent criteria that's documented, there's no way that's going to happen. So here's an example of the kind of criteria that I've seen work very well. In discovery, so let's do the SDR AE. SDR sets it up. I'm an AE. I have my discovery. At the end of that discovery, can I answer some basic questions? Number one, what is the current state of their business? Nobody talks to salespeople as a hobby. They were willing to sit down because there's something broken. It's up to me to help figure it out. So what's the current state of the business? What is the impact, the negative impact of that current state? Because if people are even talking about a change, nobody changes until their current situation is untenable. So what's that current impact? Number three, what is the desired future state, the vision they have for the business? And then four, what are the financial or other benefits that they anticipate they will see from having that future state? If a prospect will sit and have that conversation with me, that is worthy of being in my funnel. Now, I may only close 1 out of every 10 of those because it's stage 1, but I know there's something there I can work with. Because if a prospect cannot or will not sit down and have a business level conversation with you and talk openly about some sort of gap between where they are and where the business needs to be, you don't have a deal. I don't know what you're going to go sell. And because nobody buys anything because it's shiny and cool. Nobody has, there's always got to be a business case. So how do we get really good at building that in that opening?
That's wonderful. I see a lot of sales organizations where they treat a lead as anyone that I have a company name on and maybe a potential decision maker. And like that qualifies as a lead. So pop it in the pipeline. And you realize at the end of the quarter, you've got 90% of your stuff sitting in, the undiscovered vertical of your pipeline. A couple of deals have trickled down to the tail end. Well, I love the idea of making that net a lot thinner so that less stuff passes through it to get into the pipeline. That way I know as a salesperson, even if I've got 5 deals I'm working, those are 5 qualified deals. And I can really put full effort and passion into learning and serving those people because I don't have to just guess that, hey, this might be a qualified person or not. So if we've got the trigger element down, and I think you might have blended into the next step in this really seamlessly, which is making this repeatable. That's the R in trim. So you mentioned a couple of questions for us to ask to qualify that deal. And that's a great first step. But I'm curious, what are the next 3 or 4 steps in this process you would advise an organization go through so that they make sure I'm using objective facts? It may be ask those questions, Sean, but then make sure you're actually capturing it somewhere. So it's not just an off-the-cuff conversation we're having. Did you ask those questions? Yeah, I thought I did. Where's the proof? I don't know. I forgot to write it in my CRM. You know what I mean? So what are those next couple of steps that you would advocate every salesperson and leader do to make sure that my pipeline is built with objective facts?
I wish I could. Yeah, some of the difficult conversations I've had to have with sales reps reported to me because it wasn't in the CRM and they were, wanted to get credit for something. And it's like, anyway, if it's not in there, it didn't happen. It's just that you're never going to remember. You are not going to keep it in your head. So one of the things, for example, is continued discovery. Many organizations look at discovery as a one and done. They look at qualified as a binary state. Not true. Depending on whose research you read, there are 5, 7, 9 decision makers involved in B2B sales, and it just seems to be growing. So how are you gaining access? Next step is, are you multi-threading? If I'm a sales leader, what I want to see in the CRM is, are you building out a sphere of influence? But more importantly, are you having that same kind of business level discovery conversation with those individuals? Because the way that they're looking at the project, the way that the gaps that they're seeing in the business, the way that it impacts them, their budget, their department, hopefully there's overlap. Hopefully there's some alignment between them internally, but they are going to be unique. And so if you're not collecting that, if you're not building that account team, then you're going to miss out, right? Worst case, you'll get blindsided by a dark horse.
Yeah.
And you never had a shot. You don't even know because you didn't find out. But best case, you're probably leaving money on the table because you may sell them, 50 or 60% of what they need, but you just didn't know about the other. So that's something that would be a next step. Now, once you've built out a reasonable internal group, like I say, sphere of influence, whatever you want to call it, how are you then managing or controlling, I'll even say, the opportunity? If you are doing it in the way that you and I are talking about, it is service oriented. You're not selling, you're working with them. A very logical step for them should be, let's do a formal evaluation. There are always going to be things that both parties need to do. Tactical stuff, for example, systems alignment, compatibility, that type of thing. But there's also going to be business alignment. And let's get a plan in place. Some organizations I've worked with called a sequence of events. Some called a mutual plan. But let's have some sort of, again, documented agreement that there's enough of a potential business case here that we're all moving forward. And that, again, needs to be in the CRM. And it needs to be the salesperson who's responsible for keeping that document on track. Because despite everybody's best intentions, milestones will miss. They just will, right? Dates will slip. And so then who's going to realign the dates, cascade it, get it back out to the group? That's a salesperson. But those are the types of things that I'm talking about that are very repeatable, and that you probably would agree that is not a rep's opinion, right? They're collecting this information, they're documenting it, and they're building a case.
It sounds like for especially these complex B2B sales, a rep is really falling into the role of a project manager that's service dedicated. It sounds like if I'm, selling the same type of things in the same type of organizations, I could take this system that you and I are building. It could be a replicable system across all of my deals so that every deal in my pipeline has this minimum amount of information filled out. And wouldn't that help my sales leader know that what I'm forecasting actually has a chance of coming true? So I love this so far. We got the trigger, making it repeatable. Now, the iron trim is something we learned on the battlefield we had to do because we were in a dynamic environment. The folks that we were out there fighting against always had a vote in the plan, so they would change things on us in an instant. So we had to take the initiative on improvement. If we waited for the environment to change before we did, the results weren't that great. And in sales, it's the same way. So how would you recommend a sales leader take the initiative on improving the way that they are gathering this information, checking it in the CRM, making sure that it is multi-threaded, making sure there is an agreement in place? What am I going to do to improve this, and how often should I do it?
If you're a sales leader in an organization that hasn't adopted this approach across, then you are a little bit on your own. But I've actually been in that situation. And where a methodology that I had learned as a Microsoft sales leader and had used when I went to Intuit with my sales group there, et cetera, I was using with a sales team at a company where we didn't have a formal methodology. We didn't have any formal training and development for any employee, much less sales.
Wow.
So it was incumbent on anyone that was a leader to figure that out. I've always believed that, number one, we have a moral obligation to those that work for us to help develop them. Now they got to own it, right? We can't feed them, but we need to make sure that they have the opportunities to better themselves and develop their skills. And number two, very selfishly as a sales leader, I had a number to hit. So if there was nothing coming from corporate, I had to go figure out how to do it. And I found ways. And so as a sales leader, think about how you are having your pipeline reviews. A lot of sales leaders can look at pipeline reviews and coaching as the same. I don't think they are. Pipeline review is a very tactical exercise. It's inspection. It's understanding what's there. If you have your salespeople that you're not comfortable that they're basing what they're telling you on conversations they've documented, push back. I would even say if you're sitting down, if you and I were sitting down, Sean, and I'm your leader, and I say, Sean, hey, great discovery effort. I see a couple new opportunities in your pipeline, but I don't see I don't see the following things in the Salesforce. So is it really at stage 2? And if you don't have it, you can't produce it. I'm going to make you move it back to the appropriate stage and go and collect those inputs. As leaders, we often are so focused on the bottom of the funnel deals, the ones that are going to make this quarter, that we forget the top of the funnel deals are next quarter's commits. And we need to be focused on them as well. So that's one of the biggest things is inspect, but inspect early and push back if you just don't feel like they do not have information from a customer. Don't take their opinion for it. And
In the
even without
military,
support from us, a corporation, you're going to get better. So
yeah. So we had this great phrase in the military. It was trust but verify. And I think that's
yes,
something that all sales leaders could benefit from as well. So I love this. We got a
absolutely.
great way to improve it. Now, the M and trim is measuring this. So if I'm taking the time to do this, to really restructure the way that I'm going about gathering data, recording it, and how we review it in our sales reviews, it's going to take more time away. I could just be, blasting the phone and smiling and dialing. So I want to make sure this is a better way than I was using my time before. So I've got to measure it. Now, I'm going to take a wild guess and say that, yeah, we could measure closed sales because they should increase if we're more service oriented, but that's too easy. I feel like a great way to start measuring would be to track how much data am I filling out on these accounts as they flow through the pipeline. Because the more data that I have, the more recorded conversations I have, the more information, the better I'm going to be able to serve them. And that is absolutely going to lead to the lagging indicator of sales. What would you recommend I measure here to make sure that I can really prove with facts where I say this stuff is in my pipeline?
I wish I had some magical formula, but I don't. We've already hit on it. Is
Okay.
it documented? If I'm collecting it, where am I keeping that information? And it's not just for compliance. If you think about what I was talking about at the beginning, where we want to have the go-to-market teams that face, interact with customers linked up more solidly, having this stuff in Salesforce, think about when it gets past sales, you've closed the deal, and having all those conversations and the outcomes they're looking for and the challenge they're dealing with in there for a customer success manager who's getting up to speed on a brand new account, how valuable that is. So the measure is, do we see that adoption within the sales CRM? Are those notes in there? It starts very tactical level. If we don't, that's a problem. And then we have to figure out, do we have a people problem or a process problem? My experience, it's usually a people problem at that point because they haven't tried the process. That's probably another whole episode. But
that is a whole other episode.
Yeah. But measure that. And you're right. Once you've gotten to the end of the quarter, that ship sailed. You either hit the number, you didn't. So another way that I have seen that's really changed how we're able to measure these look for leading indicators is conversational intelligence platforms. Because as a sales leader, you can't be on every call. There's just no way. Whether inside salespeople, field salespeople, it doesn't matter. You can't be there. Conversational intelligence, when they're executed and implemented correctly, give you a 50,000-foot view to the conversations and the trends in those conversations your team's having. So if you've just rolled out a different way of doing discovery, for example, the kind that you and I have been talking about, you want to measure that adoption, those systems are smart enough now that they can go listen. You have to tell them what to listen for, but they'll go listen. And you'll be able to see, are those kinds of conversations happening? And you can reasonably assume if they are, you'll see the results you want. There's another lagging indicator that's one of my favorites, and that is percentage of discount. Because if the things we're talking about are done correctly, I'm not going to say you're never going to discount. Wish I could promise that. But discounting will not be your default position anymore. And you should see the percentage of discounting go down over time. So I always like to watch that. The other lagging metric I think is key, Sean, is not just did you hit the number, did you hit it with the deals you forecast you were going to do it with? Or was there too much slip and slide at the end of the quarter? And then, all of a sudden, somebody's got to be a hero. Because if you're not hitting it with the deals that you said, that will catch up to you. And you need to go back and see there's a hygiene problem somewhere in the process. So that's another measurement I think is key.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the idea of looking at the deals that I forecasted at the beginning of the quarter, how many of them closed, how many of them closed at the rate I thought they were going to close, that allows me to then update my entire system to get a better forecast for the following quarter. And we should be doing that iteratively, probably every month, but definitely every quarter. So that's a whole other episode, but another great thing that we could be measuring. So we've got now an end-to-end system for how we can begin serving more, selling more, gathering more data, and being able to objectively prove that the deal stage this thing is in, it's not just my opinion. It's It's actually where it is, and here's how I can prove it. So that's a great thing for any salesperson to do. Not only will it make your leadership happy, it'll help you sleep better at night because you'll know that you're serving instead of just selling. So,
Right.
Paul, man, awesome. I'd love to know where folks can go find out more about you, about the company you run. Where is that you're releasing your great stuff into the world? How do we get deeper into that?
Right now, they can go to revenueflywheelgroup.com. There's a place on there to book some time with me. They can read a little bit, some customer testimonials about what we do. You can also find me on LinkedIn very easily and book some time with me there. And stay tuned. But by the end of the year, my book will be out. And so looking forward to making some more announcements on that later in the year.
That'll be great, sir. Well, Mr. Butterfield, thanks so much for coming on with us. If you're listening or watching, make sure you're subscribing to that YouTube channel. If you're listening to us, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere the podcast can be found, hit the subscribe button, leave us a review. Let folks know that hope no longer has to be part of their sales strategy either. Paul, thanks so much for joining us today and giving back to the sales community. Let's get out there and make selling bulletproof.